Member Joseph Kennedy. Member Adam Freed.
Here.
Member Jonathan Golden.
Here.
Member Arlene Shaw.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The second item on the agenda then is the approval of minutes of February 27, 2015 meeting, prepared meticulously by our Secretary, Alan Dees.
With the assistance of Ms. McNeil.
Thank you. You've all had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any questions, comments, any discussion about it? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved.
Thank you very much, John, thank you very much. So, all in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. We're going to move to the second agenda item, which is a resolution of appreciation. And with your indulgence, I'd actually like to read it. Whereas Alan M. Moss has completed his term of service as a member and chair of the New York City Water Board, and whereas Alan Moss served the City of the People of New York with commitment and distinction, beginning with his appointment to the board in 2007 and later with his appointment as chair in 2008, and led the board with careful, thoughtful, dedicated, and skillful consideration of the governance responsibilities of members. And whereas Mr. Moss, as chair, stressed consistently the importance of the board's knowledge of the complexities of New York City's water and sewer system in order to fulfill the board's duty to establish rates for the system designed to ensure both the sustainable provision of services at a fair price for customers and the efficient financing of the system's infrastructure. And whereas the board wishes to recognize Mr. Moss's service to the board, now therefore be it resolved that the members of the board, as well as its officers and staff, together express sincere appreciation and gratitude to Alan M. Moss and extend to him best wishes in all of his future endeavors. It is a resolution which requires action by the board.
I move to adopt. Very proud to second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Before we go to Commissioner Lloyd's presentation, I'd like to say a couple of things, if I may. First of all, it's really a privilege to have the opportunity to serve in this new role. It could not have happened and would not have happened without the support of the Commissioner of DEP, Mr. Lloyd, and without the support of First Deputy Commissioner Stephen Mullis. Many thanks to both. I look forward to continuing to build on an already very good relationship. Over the years I've been on the board, I've turned often to Mathieu McClain, who's tolerated my ignorance about many things, and who has always been very helpful. Mathieu, thank you. I look forward to continuing to work with you. Arlene Shaw and I joined this board together in 2011, and it's been a pleasure to serve. Congratulations on your reappointment. Your service has been outstanding. I look forward to your support of the work of the Water Board in a couple of months. John Golden and Adam Freed have served this board with distinction since 2013. I look forward to your continued support. Tuan Davis and Joseph Kennedy, neither of whom could be here this morning, at least so far, are our newest members. Their appointments were announced on 23rd March. I look forward to establishing strong working relationships with each of them. We are here today, of course, for the public presentation of the rate proposal for the coming year. We're privileged to have with us Commissioner Lloyd. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a Yes, very good. Just in case I need it. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, other attendees. I would like to walk through a little background on how we got to where we are today, and then put before you the rate that we propose for fiscal year 16, which of course will then be discussed at public hearings in each borough before you subsequently vote on it. So the rate that we're proposing this year is 3.24%. We are pleased that it's the lowest rate increase since fiscal year, since 2006, 10 years ago. And you know, we always look at that second line, which is an average single-family charge, and that will be in the coming year, if this rate is adopted, $1,058 for a year, which would be an increase of $33. This 3.24%, you will of course be aware, is lower. It's actually a third lower than what we projected for fiscal year 16 a year ago. And the reason that we are able to lower the proposed rate from what we had projected is, first of all, low interest rates. Secondly, we had very strong revenues in fiscal year 15. We're $82 million ahead of plan. We've had overall positive results for fiscal year 14, including a one-time $83 million payment from ExxonMobil from a lawsuit around contamination. And our operation costs were lower by $71 million. We are, of course, very serious in trying to keep the rate down for New Yorkers. We are always focused on balancing the need to make improvements to the water and wastewater system and the need to keep the rate as low as possible. The rate on the far right, which is the water rate for 2015, which I'm doing the wall, has dropped again as it's hovered right around being at the national average for water and wastewater rates. This year it's dropped again below the national average, which, as these other comparative numbers show, is very hard to do in New York City. Practically nothing that people pay on a regular basis for their living in New York City is below the national average. And rate trends, just to put it in perspective, have gone up over the past 15 years or so, very steadily across the country. This is very significantly around both climate change, environmental issues, and coming into compliance with mandates, both the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. And we are pretty much in the middle of the pack. Our average has been, the average is 6.3%, and our average since 1999 has been 6.8%. And again, this just shows again where we are in relation to the 30 cities just below the national average, that green line, pretty much in the middle. It probably goes without saying, it's probably in all of your minds, but I always like to just repeat, our mission is to protect public health and the environment by supplying clean drinking water, collecting and treating wastewater, and reducing air, noise, and hazardous materials pollution. We serve 9 million people daily. We try to operate a safe, high-performing utility at the lowest possible cost. We try to build our capital projects on time and on budget, and we deliver, we hope, clean water, clean air, and sustainable quality of life for all New Yorkers. And you will see the mission and the goals reflected in the following pages. So most people, when they think of customer service from DEP, think of turning on their water tap or not having their street be flooded after a big rain, perhaps. But actually, a very big part of what we do that is customer service is in interacting with our 836,000 ratepayers who are our customers every day. Mr. Chair, I don't know if you want to introduce the new member.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members, this is Talon Davis. Talon, thank you. It's good to have you here. Thank you. Welcome.
So we regularly, we bill our 836,000 ratepayers. They call us frequently. They write us emails. So it's a very active relationship, of course. And with the installation of automated meter reading, those relationships have gotten much better. We have reduced the number of estimated bills by 82% since 2009, and billing disputes have fallen by 50% since 2011. We have 228,000 customers enrolled in the leak notification program, so if there's a spike in their use, we let them know, and the water board, the expansion of the leak forgiveness program that the water board adopted last year has already benefited 1,500 customers, resulting in $1.5 million in leak forgiveness, and we have 177,000 customers enrolled in the service line protection program. Going on to that other type of service, the service in people's homes and in the street, we've continued to invest in our operations and maintenance to improve service citywide. And just a couple of highlights, the resolution of catch basin complaints is 17% higher in fiscal year 15 compared to fiscal year 14. The average time to repair or replace hydrants has improved by 22%, and we have 36 fewer complaints about leaks on private infrastructure, and we think that is about the service line protection program. People know who to call when they have a leak on their property. We also continue to reap the benefits of our OpEx initiatives that we've rolled out over the past few years, especially in areas of chemical use and energy. And that same work is bringing in over $52 million annually through targeted replacement of 21,000 large meters. And just to highlight a couple of our capital projects, the Croton Filtration Plant, which those of you who've been on the board are very familiar with over the past few years. It was a very big undertaking for us to come into compliance with the Clean Water Act for the water that comes from east of the Hudson and has to be filtered. And that project is nearing completion and will be brought online in May of 2015. The new Croton Aqueduct, which is a companion piece to that, which is the rehabilitation of a 33-mile long tunnel, has also been completed, and that line is currently being disinfected to be put back into use. And the Gilboa Dam reconstruction, which was a very urgent project that started a few years ago when we realized that dam had problems which might make it inadequate to the new storms we were anticipating. That reconstruction to meet new safety standards has now been completed 2 years ahead of schedule. Looking to 2015 and some of our capital priorities, of course, the cluster of projects we call Water for the Future, which is repairing the Delaware Aqueduct, is our biggest project. That's $1 billion in the 10-year capital budget. We continue to roll out a very aggressive green infrastructure program, $879 million. We are investing heavily in energy and energy efficiency projects. That's another $639 million. We will be working on designing and beginning work on the Kensico Eastview Tunnel connection, which is $511 million in the 10-year budget. We will be doing some additional dam reconstruction upstate, again around safety measures, and we will be focusing very much on building out water and particularly sewer infrastructure in southeast Queens. We will continue to invest to support filtration avoidance west of the Hudson, $261 million. We will be building out sewer and water in Coney Island and Hudson Yards, larger, newer systems to support development there, and continue to do the connections to the third water tunnel that was put in service in the fall of 2013. All right, just to talk about Water for the Future in a little more detail, we've known for probably 20 years or more that there were leaks in the Delaware Aqueduct. The Delaware Aqueduct typically brings about 50% of the water to the city. It's the largest part of our supply. It's also the best water. These leaks were both causing water to come to the surface in areas in New York State, and they were also a concern to us that they might be weakening that aqueduct, and losing it on an emergency basis would be catastrophic for the city. So this project was designed and has been in the process of being rolled out with the hopes of completing it in 2021. When we do that, as we switch over to the new part of the aqueduct, we will have to shut off water from the Delaware Aqueduct for somewhere between 6 to 10 months. I always like to be conservative and say let's plan for a year and a half. So there also is water augmentation that has to be put in place so that we will have the water to work around having to shut off the aqueduct, Delaware Aqueduct for a period of time. So in 2016, moving ahead this very important project, we will be bidding and registering the bypass tunnel construction contract. We will complete the shaft construction at each end of that bypass, which is already underway. I invite you, I visited the bottom of shaft in progress a couple months ago, and invite all of you to do the same. It's a little terrifying and very impressive. We will complete the construction and startup of the interconnection facilities so that we can pump some Delaware water through the Catskill Aqueduct during the shutdown. We will also be doing repair and rehabilitation of the Catskill Aqueduct. The design will be done in 2016, and we are preparing the Queens groundwater for reactivation in case we need it. And of course, as I mentioned, commissioning the Croton filtration plant will be a very big part of having water during that period. Another big part of our capital program is what we call long-term control plans. Under an administrative consent order with New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, we have to submit long-term control plans for combined sewer overflows. This is part of coming into compliance with the Clean Water Act, which is now a 40-year undertaking on the part of the department. And we are developing long-term control plans now for 10 water bodies, as well as a citywide plan that includes the East River and the open waters. The very important conversations that we've been having with DEC are about where we put money and trying to invest soonest and put most of our investment in the areas of water that actually come back to New Yorkers in immediate value because they're used for recreation or because there's residential development nearby or planned for nearby. So our conversation has been to commit $1.3 billion over the next 10 years as part of also giving priority to those water bodies. And you see the total list there. The ones we're particularly focusing on are Gowanus, Jamaica Bay, Flushing Creek, Bronx River, and because those are so important to what's going on in the city right now. And as you are familiar, we also are very focused on climate change risk assessment. We started doing risk assessment for climate change focused on concerns about the water upstate many years ago. And over time, we've now broadened that to include really looking at the stormwater management within the city and also at our wastewater treatment plants, which being at water's edge, of course, are very vulnerable. And we have developed a plan and design standards for hardening the facilities that are close to the water and for expanding the capacity of stormwater management in the city. We also are doing a cogen facility at North River, which will reduce greenhouse gases and also give us more resiliency should we lose electrical power there. Of course, green infrastructure is an important and growing part of everything that we do. We've committed more than $200 million to green infrastructure projects. The priorities have been in the areas where we are addressing combined sewer overflows, and they are part of our work with DEC to come into compliance. But increasingly, we are looking more broadly at where we can use them to manage stormwater for a variety of reasons, including flooding throughout the city. A big addition to green infrastructure was our commitment this year to contribute $36 million to the Community Parks Initiative that the Parks Department is doing, so that all those parks will be reconstructed with stormwater detention underneath them, so they will all have green infrastructure and not be overflowing their stormwater into the surrounding sewer infrastructure, and we're really enormously pleased with that partnership. We've been working with the Parks Department for a long time, but it's starting to be a bolder and broader set of initiatives. And then we are working with the Trust for Public Land and the School Construction Authority to continue rolling out these playgrounds that we've been renovating. You see the before and after pictures at the bottom of that slide. They are really quite spectacular when they get done, as well as managing stormwater. We've also provided $13.6 million in grants on private property for stormwater management, which has been matched with $5.2 million in private funds. Of course, water demand we said to our new board member yesterday that we were reducing water demand, and he said being from the West Coast, he really appreciated that, he knew how important it was. But we are reducing water demand. It is not only a long-term goal for us to conserve water, it will help in future droughts. It reduces stress on our wastewater treatment plants, but also, importantly, it's a very big part of having enough water when we shut down the Delaware Aqueduct. So we have a goal of reducing demand by 5%, which would be about 50 million gallons a day. And the big pieces of that are a toilet replacement program that we are rolling out now, as well as a municipal water efficiency program, putting activation buttons on the spray showers that are proliferating throughout playgrounds. They're very popular, and also replacing bathroom fixtures in parks and in schools around the city. Another very important project for us is to start to think about how we can use our digesters at our wastewater treatment plants, not only to capture the methane and turn it into fuel for operating our old plants, but to think about how we can use those digesters more broadly. And one of the pilots that we've been doing is to take organic waste from the Department of Sanitation and to put it into the big new efficient digesters at Newtown Creek and to turn it into gas that we can use for fuel. We've completed an initial pilot on that. We're going to start a longer, bigger 3-year demonstration project this winter that will take us from about 50 tons per day to about 250 tons per day. And we are also close to working out an agreement with National Grid, and they will be building a facility on the plant site to take some of that methane, clean it, and put it into distribution for domestic use. All right, switching now to the budget, the capital outlook. Over the previous 10 years, of course, we had an enormous capital budget, and that was very driven by mandates. We talked about the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant, the Croton filtration plant. There were numerous other big projects that we were required to do, which we're not sorry we did them. They are terrific projects. They've made the infrastructure better, but we had some real stress around having to do them so quickly, and some of them in a very hot construction market, which drove up the cost, we thought. However, they are now, the money is committed, the projects are by and large built, and we are now moving into a time when, whereas in the previous 10 years, 59% of our capital commitments were mandated projects, over the next 10 years, looking out, we anticipate it to be much less, more like about 23% of our projects, or about $3.5 billion. We're looking at the chart, you can see the mandates are the darker bar below and the gray bar here. That has given us some space to play catch up on some other important priorities. We did manage to keep the third water tunnel going through the previous 10 years, but we have other big projects now that we are able to undertake in this period of time, including, of course, Water for the Future, including some of the dam strengthenings upstate, and including a lot of investment in stormwater management, particularly in southeast Queens, where residential development over the second half of the 20th century really got way ahead of the sewer and water construction, and we are going to try to accelerate our catch-up in that part of the city. As we move towards the rate that we recommend, we think about how our capital commitments that I showed on the past page become expenditures. First, we commit the project and we put aside that money so we don't run short as the project comes to completion. And then we expend it in pieces as we go from design to construction. And then as we expend it, we borrow money to pay for it, and it becomes debt service. So the three things on this chart show the commitments on the left side of each double bar, and then the expenditures next to it, and then how that affects the debt service as it builds up over the years. And you can see how these very big commitments rolled out as expenditures. They're still rolling out, and as we spent that money and borrowed to pay for it, the debt service goes up. You'll see this this annual debt service very nice dip in 2015, and that is because the Water Finance Authority has taken advantage of some very good opportunities for low interest rates to refinance and to do buybacks of $9.5 billion of higher cost debt, and that has achieved $3.8 billion of savings on the life of that old debt. Looking forward to 2016, let me just recap how 2015 is looking. The revenues are projected to be about $82 million ahead of plan. We attribute a lot of that to automated meter reading, people not having billing disputes, and we're very pleased that the City Council renewed the lien sale, which allows us to sell standalone liens if we have chronic non-payers, and it means that everybody pays their fair share. The people who do pay aren't making up for the people who don't pay, so that's very helpful in keeping our revenues going well. The 2014 financial results, which are complete now, are very strong. They were ahead of plan by $291 million, including that $83 million judgment that I mentioned earlier. Debt service is projected to be $195 million less than planned due to low interest rates, as I mentioned. The authority is using savings, that's the Water Finance Authority, to buy back $805 million of debt, which is 200 times what they had projected. And the increase in available cash will be used to achieve the lowest rate increase in 10 years. This last line is, whoops. In addition, the end of year cash on hand is the 15% we set aside every year to assure that we can pay the debt service. And then it's also, we set aside a little bit more because to have for emergencies, because when we have emergencies, sometimes they're very big emergencies and we need cash on hand. If we have a problem with the dam, we may need to get out $100 million in a year to bring people on board to fix that. But what we don't spend on an emergency, we roll over to the next year, so it becomes a credit against the next year's rate increase. All right, now looking ahead to 2016, the split of our big expenditures will look familiar to those of you who have been on the board, who attend these meetings regularly. The largest single part is debt service, followed by operations and maintenance, followed by debt relief, which we think is very important there. Looking at the specific lines, the debt service is up for the next year, but that is a conservative estimate, and we always hope that the Water Finance Authority will do extremely well and that number will be slightly lower. And if that happens, the second line, which we project to be a little less this year than last year, which is the buyback of debt or cash financing, capital construction, may go up a little bit as the year goes on. The operations and maintenance is going up a little bit because of bringing Croton online, big energy costs, big chemical costs, staffing as well. Our upstate taxes are going up. We pay taxes on all our properties upstate. Wage settlements are rolling in after several years without them. Nothing we had not anticipated, but that's what drives the budget. And the rental payment, which tracks, of course, the debt service. So again, if the debt service comes down, so will the rental payment. And we've had good luck the past few years, and we always hope that will be the case. Now, if you look at that, the operating budget that I always have trouble with pointers. The middle line under fiscal year 16, that $3,857,000 are the operating costs of the system, and then you add in the cash on hand that we hold, and that makes the 4.778, which are the total system costs. So if you'll hold on to that number as we go to the next slide, you'll see that number at the top of the page. The total system costs are the revenue that we require. So we then subtract from that the carryover from last year, that $906 million you saw on the previous page, We also subtract the $225 million we get from selling our water to upstate communities. We have 1 million people who use our water upstate, and that leaves a net revenue need of $3,647,000. So then, we look at the revenue that we brought in the prior year, and that was in the box at the bottom of the page, $3,582,000. And the consumption that we anticipate, the amount of water we think people will be using, will be less because people are conserving water, and we think that if we were charging the same rate as this year, would reduce how much we brought in by $49 million. And that then means that if we kept this rate that we have in fiscal year 15, the net revenue would be $3,533,000. That is not as much as we need. We need $3,647,000. The difference, the additional money we need is $114 million, and in order to bring in that revenue, we need to raise the rate by 3.24%, and that is how we calculate the rate. The rental payment is the rent we pay the city based on our 1985 agreement for the infrastructure that we took over when we became a water utility, the water and wastewater utility. And the charge for that, according to the agreement, is 15% of the annual debt service. From fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 14, the city implemented a rental payment return pilot to put some of that money back into the water system, and that has returned $31 million to the system over the last 3 years. In addition, last year the city also returned an additional 10% to us. They took the money in from the previous year and gave it back to us in 15. Do I have that right? In 15. It always lags for a year. We pay them the debt service, they return it the following year. And that was a way of institutionalizing giving money back from the rental payment to the water system. And then this year, the commitment has been made to double that to a 20% return and to continue that going into the future. And so that is what you will see across the bottom of the page. Last year, we started introducing several programs to help low-income ratepayers. And we are both expanding and continuing those, and they will be considered as part of the rate adoption. So the home water assistance program that we introduced in 15 is a $116 credit, which is 25% of the annual minimum charge, was given to people who receive the Home Energy Assistance Program, which is overseen by the Human Resources Administration of the city. It's a federal program that tests that to a certain income level. So we have extended that to our ratepayers. If they qualify for HEAP, we will return to them a credit equal to 25% of the annual minimum charge. And this year, that was about 12,500 people. This year, we are going to expand that to another group of people, elderly people and disabled people who qualify for the Department of Finance property tax exemptions. Again, that's an income test. And that will add an additional 46,500 people, so that overall we will be giving some assistance to 59,000 ratepayers. That may be more people than 59,000, or 70% of our customer base. Another program that we introduced last year that you approved was to freeze the minimum charge. People who use about 100 gallons a day get billed at a minimum charge. And the freeze last year was the first time that we hadn't raised it every year to go up with the water rate. This year we propose freezing it for a second year, so the daily rate for the minimum charge is $1.27 a day, and about 26% of the bills issued to single-family homeowners are on this minimum charge. So this will benefit about 26% of our single-family homeowners who are typically elderly. People who use less water typically are empty nesters who are not using as much as they did when their house was full of a bunch of other people. So we think that that will benefit customers. It will save overall about $2.2 million, and we think that that will, in 15 and 16 combined, it will be about $4.3 million of savings. We have a couple of additional programs. We are going to offer this year for the first time monthly billing for everyone. A lot of our customers like the quarterly billing, but many people ask us for monthly billing. They think it's easier to budget, and heretofore we've only done that if people were signed up for electronic billing. But we are going to make it available for anyone who wants it now. And then to incentivize customers to roll into e-billing, they will get a one-time $10 credit if they sign up for e-billing. And then in addition, we are required by EPA and the State Department of Health, I believe it is, to monitor lead and copper in service lines that have lead and copper in them. And we have to have a certain number of those, and we try to incent people to sign up, so we will always be monitoring a representative sample. Last year, we offered a $25 credit to get people to register. We still need more registrants, so we're proposing increasing that for a $100 credit for people to allow us to monitor their service line up to the number, the minimum, up to the number of people that we need. So when we get to, it's first come, first serve, when we get to that number, which I believe is something like 450 households, then we would no longer offer it to additional people. And then the last piece is, of course, the service line protection program. This has been an extremely, I think, important and successful program. People typically don't realize that their service line, their water line in, their sewer line out, is probably very old unless they live in a new building. And if it fails, they don't fail very frequently, but if it fails after 100 years or 80 years, it can be a very expensive proposition to replace it, and the service line is the responsibility of the property owner. So we have, on a competitive basis, selected a company to provide insurance both on service, on water line replacement and on sewer line replacement. You see the rates at the bottom. When some of their costs, according to an index increase, they are allowed to increase their rates. I think that either water or sewer could increase it this year, but they've chosen not to, so there will be no change in either of those rates this year. So returning once again to the first slide, you see the 3.24% that we are asking you to consider for an increase to the 2016, for the 2016 rate. You see what that increase would be at the bottom of the page. And then the last page is, of course, we now, all of us go to hearings in each borough where the public has a chance to hear this presentation, ask questions, give us their comments prior to a consideration and a vote on a proposed rate on May 1st. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I, along with my colleagues, will be happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for an excellent presentation. Thank you. Are there questions from the members?
First, I would just like to commend DEP and all the staff in the Water Finance Authority as well. New York City is one of the most complex, oldest, largest, best run and managed system, and it really is a testament not only that it works every day and we take for granted much of that, but that rate's been able to maintain a lower increase than average in many places, given the scale of the historic investments that have been made over the past 10, 15 years, Water for the Future, the long-term control plans, green infrastructure, dealing with climate adaptation before Sandy, and investments that were made in post-Sandy, as well as the investments in the watershed and protecting our water at its source. So just want to commend that and certainly go above and beyond to make sure we express our appreciation of the professional staff at DEP that does this work. One question that I know has come up last year in terms of the water rates, looking at different models and evaluating conservation rates, looking at stormwater charges and whether they're associated with the actual property or as a percentage of our consumption rate. I know there are some logistical challenges with doing that given the EP system. I was wondering if it's something we could just talk to the thought process behind the evaluation of those different models.
And as you know, we have looked at some of those things in the past, and we continue to look at them, and I'm going to ask Steve, if he will, to talk a little bit about some of the thinking that we've been doing and hope to do over the next year or so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning.
Morning.
So we commissioned a rate structure study, which was completed in 2009, 2010, and we looked at a number of alternative rate structures, including a rate that would incent our customers to conserve water. We looked at stormwater charge, carving out a separate stormwater charge. And in fact, we implemented a pilot involving a number of street-level parking lots that don't receive water service and so had not been receiving a water bill from us, but because they were large paved impervious surfaces, when there was a rainstorm, the runoff from their surfaces would contribute to the stormwater going into our sewer system, taxing our sewer system, and contributing to combined sewer overflows. We implemented that pilot. We had calculated that the cost of our handling stormwater was approximately 10% of, if you think back to what the Commissioner presented as a $4.8 billion enterprise, the cost of stormwater was about 10% of that entire system cost. That translated into about 6 cents per square foot for these parking lots. We implemented it. The revenue we received from them is about $500,000 a year. It's a very small portion. On the good side, we got very little, if any, pushback from the parking lot industry, as it were. And it highlighted for us a number of challenges in expanding a stormwater charge to a larger population. Because if we're going to base a stormwater charge on the amount of impervious surface that is the primary cause of the stormwater running off and entering our sewer system, it is a massive data collection and maintenance effort, as well as it shifts the balance of who pays how much for the total water cost. It shifts that burden largely to single-family homes because the ratio of their impervious square footage to the amount of drinking water that they consume is very high. So taking all those things into account, we also we have a billing and collection system that is over 20 years old, and it's rather rigid. The number of customer service improvements that the Commissioner mentioned earlier, we've been able to roll out. We've been able to mine a lot of automated meter reading data to provide automated leak notification, enable customers to look at their consumption online in real time. But that's been a very big challenge to layer these improvements on top of an old system. We are going ahead. We're fully committed to bringing in a new water system. It's a long-term prospect. It is. We should expect that it's a process that takes about 5 years. We are going to design the system, first we would be looking to get as close to an off-the-shelf product as possible. But we are going to be planning and designing and implementing that system to provide the flexibility to change the structure so that if circumstances warrant changing the structure, for example, carving out a separate stormwater charge or having more flexibility on conservation and drought pricing, which we can support easily with automated meter reading under a new system. But we should expect that that's about a 5-year process. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, perfectly so, thank you.
Oh, okay.
I actually do have, thank you, Commissioner, thank you to your team for briefing me yesterday. 2 questions. One, if you go back to page, I think it's 22, it's talking a little bit about the debt buyback program. You know, why do we, in our minds, justify that this $580 million increase is accretive year over year? It goes up considerably this year and it goes down to 350 next year. And much of the increase in water rates is going to pay us for these debt buybacks. So that's my first question, and that's, why don't you start?
All right, so Tom Palacieri's here from Water Finance Authority. Tom, could you
Sure.
speak to that? Why don't you come up here so that we'll get you on recording.
So we had planned for a smaller amount of either to use the funds to buy back debt or as pay-as-you-go financing. Because of the good financial results that we're seeing, we had extra money, so it was already built into the prior year rate. So what we looked at was buying back some high coupon debt that's in our debt portfolio. We have $30 billion of debt. And by buying back high coupon debt, we're able to realize a significant amount of savings, which then are sort of spread out over subsequent years. And we're able to lower the debt service going forward such that future rate increases will be lower. So if we weren't doing this, if you took this sort of 805 out of the equation, our forecast for future rate increases would be much higher.
I guess my 2 questions are, one, what is your overall yield on your debt by buying back 805? Does it go from 2? And the second question is, why couldn't you take some of that 805 and spread it out over the next couple of years?
That's exactly what we're doing, actually. Well, to take your first question first, in the 4th bullet there, the 805 million in debt service is going to achieve 1.1 billion in savings. So it's a pretty good ratio return, if you like. And that savings is actually spread out. So the savings isn't all in a single year. It's actually spread out. It's going to help us stabilize our rates. The bulk of the savings sort of come within the next 5 years, which is, generally our forecast is focused on trying to stabilize rates through that 5-year period. So that's what we did. It's not entirely within that period, but it's sort of spread out. So if you can imagine, our profile for debt service is generally increasing. This is going to decrease the rate of increase. It's still increasing. That's hard to get around because of as long as we're spending money on capital, that's hard to get around. But we've sort of lowered the rate of increase, which will then help us to lower the future rate increases to support the entire system.
And I'm sorry, the last one, the 805 this year versus spreading some of that out in the next couple of years is because
the 805 was realized. It will be realized this year. So we actually we'll have the money in hand this year. So actually, the mechanism to spread that out is by buying back this higher coupon debt. We're in a very, very low interest rate environment at the moment, so it actually makes a lot of sense for us to look at some of the debt we've sold in prior years. You know, actually not too long ago, rates were much higher, as you probably know. So by buying back 5+% coupon debt, it sort of takes the money this year that we sort of have in hand, the 805 that we have in hand, and it actually enables us to spread that out, to do actually, I think, what you're suggesting. So, but the 805 is actually because of the good financial results that we've had for a variety of reasons. O&M is lower, we've managed to lower our debt service versus projections. Revenues are coming in stronger. Some of our assumptions were on the O&M side as well, allowed the collective bargaining settlement, for example, allowed us some certainty in labor costs, which allowed us to bring down some of the assumptions that we build into O&M. So all those, I'd say this year was somewhat unique because sort of everything kind of broke our way on revenues and expenses, debt service, interest rates. So we ended up with several $100 million more than we expected to have, which we took to sort of buy down the debt and lower our expenses in subsequent years.
Let me ask actually a follow-up question on that from the flip side. Are you able to give us a sense as to what the projected growth in debt looks like over time? I'm assuming that virtually all of the capital projections are expected to be funded by additional debt, and in turn, what that would mean in terms of the cost of servicing the debt over time with reasonable assumptions, given that 44% of our current budget is spent on servicing debt.
Yeah. On the debt service side, looking forward based on the sort of current capital plan and the projections for spending. On the debt service side, we're at debt, that sort of year-over-year debt service growth is probably going to be in the 3% range. So, you know, you can sort of think of it as, you know, debt service is, you know, just rough numbers, kind of half of the cost of operating the system. And so those costs are going to be going up kind of on average in the 3%-ish range, depending on interest rates. If we continue to be in this low interest rate environment, that number will probably be a bit lower, but you know, we need to project out if we return to a sort of, and as we do in our projections, if we return to I don't know if normal is the right word, but a higher interest rate environment, which we expect at some point, even under those conditions, we think, and based on what the capital spending that we have projected, we think the debt service is going to sort of grow at a 3% range. And in addition, we sort of have some natural smaller increases if you just look at the debt service profile today, that sort of, like I said, we've taken this cash and we've sort of lowered the growth in the existing debt service. So then you sort of layer on top of that the future debt service, and that's around 3%.
What do you expect roughly, given our capital plans, or at least the capital plans that are in place now, would be the year-over-year growth on total debt as opposed to debt service?
Total debt, I'm not sure if I have that number. I may need to just get back to you on that. I can gather up that. So let me just double check here. One second. Yeah, that's debt service. Yeah. If I could get back to you on the debt number, I just don't have it here. It's going to be roughly, you know, it's, you know, there's definitely a correlation between debt service and debt, so it'll be roughly in line. But I'll get that number for you.
Any other question? A comment in that question. Back on page 22, I was startled in a very pleasant way to learn that the AMR project has resulted in 80, and has had a positive revenue impact of $82 million. That's terrific. If there are other opportunities like that laying around someplace, I think you should go there immediately. But that's a terrific part of this presentation, and
My question is one you may not be able to answer. The Home Energy Assistance Program, this is page 26, Commissioner, and it's that we are able to be of assistance to nearly 60,000 residents who are low income, also qualify for HEAP, is a wonderful thing. Does that legislation, I mean, it's been around for a while, I gather, does it sunset? Do we know whether or not, is this something that's continuing into the future?
We have our Deputy Commissioner of Customer Services, Nancy Seinflone, who spent the last 33 years at National Grid and its predecessors, and she's very familiar with the HEAP program.
It's not that it's due to sunset, it needs to be appropriated every year. And actually, even yesterday was Light Heat Day on the Hill, and all the utilities and not-for-profits were up there encouraging their legislators to, again, please fund Light Heat. And that program, along with the other programs, are perfect for us to give these credits out because we are not qualifying customers. We're not spending staff. We're getting a black file right from HRA, who did all of the work for us. So that's a very natural fit for us to partner with another agency.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, we look forward to seeing as many members as possible beginning on the 27th of April on Staten Island. And we look forward to the public hearings. We will all commit to keeping an open mind about the outcome until after those public hearings. If there's no further business, then may I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. John, thank you. Thank you, Arlene. Hearing no objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you.